Hi, and welcome to episode 5 of Something Blue, a podcast that looks to explore interest in cinema through the guise of, so far, people that are just a bit nuts about collecting physical media. They're in Blu-rays, 4Ks, that kind of thing, and using boutique Blu-rays. I am joined by a very, very good friend this evening, and well, it's evening for me, it's morning for you, and I've had I've had the pleasure of being on his channel many times, and I think this is the first proper time you've been on my channel, is that right?
I feel like we've done a few collaborations. But
we've done the collaborations, of course, indeed.
Yeah,
indeed.
Of course.
But you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Nathan Jones, and I had run the channel specifically Blu-rays with Nathan Jones over on my YouTube channel. So, and I've also actually even been in that house, that very house with you.
He has indeed.
Which is wild.
Quite recently, in the big scheme of like world events, you know, not much has happened in the world since then. You know, we've only had like a war between Russia and Ukraine, and you know, those kind of things.
Rising, just really terrible economies, and I think
all that kind of stuff. But
yeah,
importantly, you were able to come over here and still buy a few Blu-rays and bring them back to your collection. And I'm sure you have watched every single one of them, because that's what we do, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've watched every single one.
You actually have done not too bad, actually. I think you've been through them, and I think of what you picked up that day, and I'm like, right, you did watch that. You watched it. You're better than I am, Nathan, that's for sure.
Well, maybe I've seen 3 of the 20 I picked up. So.
That's about the right ratio.
Yeah. I think that's about right. As most of us collectors actually know that problem pretty well, probably.
Yeah, indeed. But the 3 that you've watched, I'm sure, were all super interesting. So that's what it's about. You get something out of those 3, and you think the other 17 have a lot to live up to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll see how I'll have to come on later and talk about the things that I picked up a year ago.
Yeah. Indeed. So, like, you've had a lot of ups and downs over the past couple of months. I think it's fair to say you've had house troubles, car troubles, you've had the whole scheme of it, but some things are constant. You seem to be back in a better place, watching a few movies. Your output in your channel's been going back up as well.
Yeah. I was going to say I've had 2023 has not been the best year for me, but here we are in October, which is one of my favorite times of the year, just in terms of weather, in terms of what I'm going to be watching, and hopefully I'm just trying to switch my mindset now that I finally have my house back in order, which is the biggest thing for me. So, yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, we were just talking before we started recording there. Nathan was sharing me ideas for his Halloween outfit, which I must say is it's a high bar to hit after your efforts last year, let's put it that way, because if you didn't see Nathan's profile on Instagram or on his channel, well, you can tell everybody what you did last year.
Yeah, I was, if you've seen the movie The Lighthouse, I was Willem Dafoe's character in that. I was able to get the hat, and I had like a pea coat of sorts, and then I got a pipe as well, and so then I became as disheveled, and I tried to thin my jaw out as much as Willem Dafoe's, but I can't get the features right just yet, so I tried my best.
20 years would have done it, but at least you already had the beard in place, and you know that was a key feature of that outfit, if you want to say.
Well, that's the inspiration for all the Halloween costumes I try to do now, is to have a beard, and so that's actually where this next one's coming through. We'll see how I do it. This is this next one is going to be much more of a stretch of reference. It's lived in my head for pretty much 25 years of my life. So, I mean, I watched this when I was around 6 or 7 years old. So that's the reason why I wanted to do it. And I think it's an iconic image, at least in the 50s. So,
yeah. So people have got clues to it. That's fun. They can have guesses down in the comments if they want to, or they can just wait to Halloween till Nathan. I'm sure you'll have it in a couple of places once you put the finishing touches. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. I just gotta put it all together.
Cool. Right, we'll start with what we've been watching, what rabbit holes have been going down, what kind of things have been tickling our fancy over the past while. You get to start, Nathan. You're the only guest I have today, so you get the floor. Go weird, wacky, wild, whatever you want to do.
Well, I'm going to just do this the whole time, pretty much. Well, actually, this is something I got last year, and I think this came out last year. I might be incorrect. My years are off now. now that I'm getting older, it's starting to really, I don't know what's going on anymore. But I got this Cartoon Saloon's Irish Folklore trilogy that I finally was able to watch.
Nice.
I hadn't seen it yet, so really excited to finally dive into this. I've known about the first film, The Secret of the Kells, for a long time. Honestly, like, because it came out nearly 12, 13 years ago, something like that. Yep. So yeah, I watched this film, and then I watched the second film in here, Song of the Sea. And then the third film is The Wolfwalkers.
Yep.
Yeah. And I have not dived into the special features yet, but there's a whole disc that is dedicated to all of those, and just the studio that put this together. Just gorgeous animation. I really, really enjoyed each of the stories. I think the interesting thing too is a lot of these stories are fairly dark and like very. I suppose it's very grim fairy tales-esque, but obviously with an Irish tinge to it, getting that Celtic background, and kind of seeing a lot of that traditional stories passed down in a very different way. But I really love the animation style, and I think it's really fascinating seeing all these stories kind of come to life in very colorful ways, I suppose is the best way to describe it. So, what about you? Have you seen these films?
I've only seen Wolfwalkers. I know the stories of one of the other ones, for instance, but it's strange you say that. I hadn't really thought about that, because a lot of Irish folk tales centre around children as a basis, like the Children of Lear and stuff that are in there. But they often are quite dark around how the children are treated, and that the children often rise up out of the darkness, so to speak, to some greater heights, whether that's a fantasy animal or whatever it is that they end up doing. So I hadn't really considered that, Nathan, which is definitely true. But it's one of those things. Sometimes when films, etc., are a bit close to home, you think, I could watch that anytime, because that'll be a comfort watch in some way. And that means you just don't get round to watching them. The only reason I'd seen Wolfwalkers was because it was on Apple TV, I think, at the time, and it was thrown front of your face all the time. Every time you logged into Apple TV Plus, it was like, watch this, and you're like, okay, I will watch it one time. And it's just terrific animation. I think it's easy to think that animation is only one thing when you see, like, Japanese anime generally has a, like, Toon has a style, Disney has a style, Pixar has a style, are sort of recognizable for themselves. But that animation can live outside of that, and you see some of that stuff from going back to the 70s, like we had seen Son of the White Mare and stuff, the Hungarian stuff that came out last year.
The film that we never stop talking about.
Oh yeah, it's just terrific. So, like, there's lots of things you can do with animation, and I just love when somebody, and especially in this case, the trilogy of films that kind of took the same style and did 3 films and did, like, well, I'm sure it was an unofficial trilogy that somebody just kind of went in the end, that we could actually box this together and make a really nice release set, which I've always meant to pick up. So, good to hear that you're enjoying it, for sure. Which your favourite of the 3?
I would say Song of the Sea, honestly. It's one that very much very akin to what we were talking about with the lighthouse. I have a weird obsession with the ocean. I'm also terrified of it, which I think is very healthy. So it's a very interesting thing. So I think that's the one that hit home the most, even though I'm landlocked in Missouri, which is very dead center of the states. So, but it is ironic that I decided to choose this box set recently, and then we're like coming on to your channel, and it's like oh yeah, it does hit home a little bit, right? So
serendipity in some cases, that's the way that it goes. Yeah, I remember when you were over, and I took your trip up the coast, and I purposely took the coast road. One, because it's like phenomenally beautiful, but also like how taken you were with it even at that stage. Like, there is a power and a beauty and a danger in it, but it's also incredibly beautiful.
Yeah, it's like, well, I couldn't imagine living there every day. It's obviously it probably hits different for the people who live there, and
for sure.
Their way of life and whatnot. So that's the other thing too, is I've always taken for granted the places where you live, and then the places you visit. And so that's a place that I visit that I remember very fondly.
Yeah,
so
that's cool. Excellent first choice. So, like, you've done the classic collector's thing there and cheated. You used one choice and you made it 3.
Yes, which we will only cover technically 3 more movies later for me.
Oh, nice. Excellent first choice. So another one added to my list. I've got to make sure I pick it up the sale, because if I picked it up this late, I've got to justify it to myself that the reason that I picked it up this late was because I was waiting for a good price.
Or maybe a good whisper in the ear of telling you to buy it.
Indeed. Or a good recommendation, a good strong recommendation to go. Excellent. Next choice.
Yeah, I was going to say similar stories. This is actually something I haven't seen since I was really a kid. Actually, I'm still on the animation kind of side of things, and so I picked this DVD up. Actually, you already know what it is, I think. But I got Lord of the Rings. So from 1979, I believe.
Yeah, it is. 79, right?
Something like that. But yeah, it's the Ralph Bakshi, Lord of the Rings that a lot of us, kind of grew up with. And, I guess less so for me. I mean, I watched the cartoons actually before the movies came out in the very early 2000s, which obviously captured me. And I mean, you can see behind me, I'm a little obsessed with Lord of the Rings. I was going to say, it's crazy that I don't have this movie. I would love to see this on Blu-ray.
Oh yeah.
This is actually the last DVD I bought. I haven't bought a DVD, and I have no idea how long. But this was fun to revisit. I love the animation in here. I love the kind of combination of the different, there's the live action stuff that is shot in the backdrop that they over contrasted or under contrasted to make sure it kind of looks like it's animation of sorts. And so there's that element plus the animation style itself. So there's these really interesting just kind of juxtapositions going on with the filmmaking choice. And I think it's ironic too, because this cut out obviously right around the Two Towers part. And it eventually came back with Return of the King to make it a 2-part film, of sorts. It came out, I think, in the early 80s.
I was going to say there was a bit of a gap that went between the two, because my memory was always that the film just stopped. And people will not realise this. You mightn't even realise this as well, Nathan. See, back in the days before internet, I actually seen this on TikTok the other day. Somebody had asked the question, what did people do before the internet if you didn't know anything? And somebody made the point, you just didn't know it. Nobody knew the answer. So when you seen the first part of the Lord of the Rings thing that was there, you just thought that was it at the end. It wasn't. You couldn't look it up as a resource and for somebody to tell you, oh, they did make the other part of that, or they did finish it off in some way. For me, it was just one of those sad tales. It just stopped there. It wasn't successful enough. It never got done again or looked at again. And it was always one of those things, is this all we're ever going to have for Lord of the Rings? This incredibly famed story, this very, thing that people hold very, very dear. Is nobody ever going to take it on? And it's only when you get the word, obviously, that Peter Jackson was going to do it, that you went, oh, please don't mess this up. The pressure goes on at that stage.
Strange choice. Very strange choice at the beginning until we finally saw the finished project. You're like, oh, the guy who's done all the, the puppet work in the horror movies, right? Is that the guy? So, I'm glad that they finally did.
Oh, for sure.
And life before the internet, I miss it a little bit. So
it is true. It was the same thing. I think. Can you imagine doing a podcast without the internet as a guide for? Well, to be fair, you probably could say anything, and people will go, "That's probably right,"
Yeah. People wouldn't fact check you.
People wouldn't be able to fact check me quite as well. Or if they did fact check you, go, "I think you're wrong," and then nobody could prove it. Really.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean that's pretty much the states now, right? So political scenes.
That's pretty true.
I'm trying to escape. So.
Yeah, that's nice. But obviously big fans, both of us, of the films. Have you read the books? Haven't you as well?
Yeah. They're right there, actually, on that bookshelf. Boromir's protecting it. You can barely see it. They're next to the Game of Thrones books.
Game of Thrones. I was going to say, I recognize the color scheme of the Game of Thrones books.
Yeah, they're the small paperback ones, right there, the Lord of the Rings.
And the Lord of the Rings beside it. Yeah, mine are behind me somewhere as well. Probably buried behind a lot of other stuff. Yeah, I can't see them.
You got to keep it secret and keep it safe.
Yeah, keep it safe indeed. And my kids will one day say, "Can I read that?" And I go, "I don't know. You're ready. I just don't know. I think maybe you need to step up to it." I don't think you're there yet.
A couple more years.
Yeah, but I think it'll be in my lifetime. Somebody will take another run at doing it again, which we all say will be completely unnecessary. But
it'll
somebody will
probably be a cash grab.
yeah, somebody will think, do you know what we make lots of money? Lord of the Rings. Somebody, that's a great idea. Absolutely brilliant idea. Like, those films are 15 years old. No, they actually are more than that by now. But somebody will say they're 30 years old or something.
20 plus, yeah. Oh, actually, yeah. Almost, yeah.
Yeah, 2000, yeah. Dear me, time ticks on. When you see them all in the cinema and you kind of go, oh no. I was a much younger man about then. But yeah, that's a great choice as well. And I haven't watched that, I would say, in 30 years. Probably a bit more than 30 years, that animation. And it is one of those things, if somebody announced it for Blu-ray, it would go straight on the to-buy list, if you know what I mean, of whatever the month is. You know, it'd be one of those things, we've been waiting on something like that for a long time. Let's get it. But such is life. Right, I'll break this up a little bit. I'm going to go for, well, actually, I've said before, a lot of mine are very biggish movies. I'll go for the rewatch that I did, because I was making my way through the Columbia Classics set, Volume 2.
Oh, nice.
So you've got a choice of 1 of 6, if anybody knows what that is. And a film that I've been sort of so-so on, I think you did a podcast of Let's Watch 2 with Sam about it as well. Am I right that you did Taxi Driver with Sam? Was that somebody else?
I did not I didn't talk about Taxi Driver, but I've seen that film quite a bit.
Seen that film.
So.
I'm misremembering who the guest was that time anyway. But Taxi Driver, right? And I have not seen Taxi Driver in, say, 10, 12 years or something. And I have to say, this watch made me appreciate that I didn't really understand what the film was about beforehand. I always thought it sort of celebrated Travis Bickle's character. You know, try to showcase him as, this is what happens when you don't take care of people kind of thing, and say that this is like nearly glorifying in the outcome of the way that he twisted, and you know, and that's not what the film's about. And I think it probably takes me having watched a lot of Scorsese, a lot of Schrader, a lot of films in and around that time for me to actually come around and adjust and see a different meaning to this film, if that makes sense. And I mean, it's a goddamn masterpiece. Holy shit. I have it number 2 on my Scorsese list now. Like, I have to say, I know there's a lot of recency bias will play into that, but I just sat for most of the runtime of the film going, this is phenomenal in ways that I hadn't appreciated beforehand.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up the celebration aspect, because I definitely feel like that has been the case for a lot of people over the years, at least in the terms of the, I guess that is literally me meme that is going around. Obviously, the Joker kind of brought that back up.
Same idea.
Quite a bit, since obviously that movie in particular, you know, took a lot from this movie, and King of Comedy as well. So, and De Niro's in all 3. So.
Well, that's very true. Yeah, but I don't. It's one of those things, though. I think it's one of those cases where you have your own lens through which you watch any art or appreciate any art, and you project yourself on the screen. You project yourself into the story regardless of how it's going. So how you're feeling at that time can influence what you take out of it. And I was just a bit shocked after about half an hour, 45 minutes, that I was like, oh, no. This film's something very, very different. I started seeing the film through the eyes of Peter Boyle, for instance. I started seeing the film through the eyes of Sybil Shepherd. I've seen it through the eyes of Albert Brooks. You know, I've seen it through the eyes of everybody else. Travis, rather than kind of the camera looking at Travis all the time. And I think that says something about when you rewatch movies and you get a whole fresh new perspective on something. And to the point that I always would have went, Taxi Driver? I just don't get why everybody loves it. Now I'm going to be the mansplainer.
Well, you covered the actual truth of the movie and, you know, why it should be celebrated. So I do like the different aspect side of it too, because especially with a lot of the shots too, where there's really shots of nothing going on, but that's very purposeful, of course. Obviously, that's masterful in the direction and the writing. So, which is why we still talk about those cats today.
That's true. And the reason why, like, De Niro is incredibly celebrated, you know, he basically carries a lot of this film by himself, even with all the characters that you talked about, you know, and how it does. But I'll have to think who did the Taxi Driver episode with Sam. I thought it was you. You've done a couple. Let's just say I have you appropriated. I've done every episode with Sam now. You know, maybe that's.
Well, I hope I'm not Travis Bickle. Is what I'm saying. I'm not. I am not. Who said it? Was it Gaspar Noé? So he's the one. Yeah, he was the one who said that. So
Yeah. Cool. And the second one I'm going to talk about is, well, something that's about as far in my comfort level, but I thought it's seasonally appropriate. So, 101 Films, this partnership seems to have disappeared, did a partnership with AGFA. So, AGFA, who are Vinegar Syndrome partner label mostly in America. And I would say the AGFA films, I always watch and see at least one really cool thing, and the rest of it's kind of not that great or something, but it always has loads of really good ideas in it, whatever. I assume no, but Scary Tales is the one I'm going to talk about because it's a rough horror anthology. Not seen it, I would imagine?
I haven't, no.
So, a horror anthology, and when I think of horror anthology films, obviously there are a lot of them, a lot of very famous ones. You would be forgiven for thinking that a really, really low budget horror anthology film has some challenges ahead of it to be good. This somehow manages it. This is phenomenally watchable. It has all of those great things about low budget movies that are awesome. I think I put in my review. Do you know the scenes where they go into bars and people are dancing? And there's obviously no music, but they're obviously acting dancing. And there's always never quite enough people in the bar for it to actually look like a proper club scene or otherwise. Those are some of my favourite things of all of movies. In fact, John Wick 4, that I watched, had it recently as well. It was like, these people are dancing while there's murder just happening all around them, etc. You know, this is sort of ridiculous. Well, this has one of those scenes in it, but in the context, like the first horror anthology part is about a guy that finds a haunted bottle top of a beer, or it might be root beer, even it might be one of those, and he wears it as a necklace, and it turns him into a demon. And like the makeup isn't great, the whole thing, his acting's not great, but somehow every time is a bit ridiculous, you kind of remember that it's a bottle cap. and that the whole concept was ridiculous to start off with, you know. And the thing is, his partner's going, well, you've changed. And he's like, oh, I don't know, I feel fine. While he's rubbing his bottle top on his shirt. It's a ridiculous looking chain that nobody would even turn around and say, that's just dumb looking on you. No, it's it. So it's got a playful nature, I think, to it, and a lot of fun. And if you were looking for an AGFA film, and actually, you know, when you go and see the reviews, you kind of go, a lot of people have the same feeling about Scary Tales, because sometimes you watch a film that's generally not good, but you really enjoyed, and you go, yeah, this was just my state of mind. I was just feeling right in the mood for this at the right time. But then you go on the aggregate sites like IMDb, Letterboxd, and kind of go, no, this did the same thing for a lot of people. So Scary Tales, whether it's on AGFA itself, it's actually got the same cover art on the AGFA release as it does on the 101 films. Great fun. Great fun.
Yeah, I gotta watch that. I literally just watched Asylum this morning. So speaking of horror anthologies, so which good. You know, my last thing I mentioned in my last video, which is where I am doing my 31 days of Halloween. So, yeah. Starting with Asylum. So started with Asylum. Just finished A Blade in the Dark, but we'll not talk about those right now. So.
Yeah, that's good. I've still both in wrapper on my shelf, both to watch. I could just do your A to Z. You know, that's what I could do. I'll just keep on watching your Letterboxd, Nathan, and then just do the same films as you.
Honestly, that's a new part of the challenge. Honestly, it's a lot less effort and probably a lot less money spent as well. So I like this idea.
Yeah, that'd be good. So there's my first two. What have you got next?
My last two here. One actually just came out recently and has actually been talked about a lot. In fact, one of my friends, Daniel, who runs the Cobwebs channel,
yeah.
He actually just went to 4K. He got to 4,000 subscribers, which is just insane. He jumped from like 1,000 a couple months ago to 4,000. So I'm just like, wow.
We're doing a lot right there. Let's put it that way.
That's true. And actually, this is the namesake of the channel. It's Cobweb.
Very good.
So here's the slipcover. It's got Lizzie Kaplan in it, who you've seen probably a million times in several things. She's great. And then Anthony Starr, who is in The Boys. He's Homelander. If anyone's seen that show, very menacing, very perfect for that role, and he's also perfect for this role.
Yeah.
So I won't explain this movie too much, but more or less there is a kid who I'm trying to think. His name is Peter, and I don't know the actor's name, but he is living with his parents, Lizzie, the people I just mentioned. They're a little strange. They're a little bit controlling and very not right. But anywho, you can also tell that this kid is a little bit bothered, and at night he starts hearing scratches and sounds in the walls, and then starts hearing voices, and then you kind of get the story unfolds from there. There's a lot of twists and turns, but the scares are really, really well done. The I guess the makeup and prop design and like just the pacing of the movie is just really splendid. And honestly, I was really surprised because I had not heard it until it came out on physical media that this movie has garnered quite a bit of attention. So highly recommend people check this movie out. It's very good. It's got a very great atmosphere. It's great pace, and it's got some good scares. So I definitely recommend checking out Cobweb.
And it seems you have this thing for torturing children at the moment. This is the theme in your picks. This is
Torture children. Well, the last one I have is not torture children, technically. So I suppose there's that. But I just realized that's the case too. But do you consider hobbits children? They're 50. 50 and at least
childlike, maybe, but maybe for you, when you're saying why you like it, that you thought of them as children. This theme that your October season has kicked off with. I just don't like kids. Kids suck and deserve to be put through the hell of for my enjoyment, really more.
Well, I was going to say you have kids of your own, so I mean, I suppose there's a little bit, you can make fun of them, I guess. So
yeah, there's a Lee Mack joke where he says, he's a comedian, stand-up comedian here. You probably don't know him, but he says his wife always says to him, you can't be saying that about the kids and the family. That's hurtful to the kids and me, and your family. And he says, what joke? And he says, well, I'm going to tell you it now because that's what it is. And he says, it was only until he had 2 kids that he realised he only wanted 1 kid. And he says, no, of course that's a joke. I don't want any. So that's his joke, and it tickles me a little bit. Not true, of course. No, love my kids.
Not, of course, yeah. Kids are great, by the way. That's it. But you could be without both. So 0. So,
sometimes it feels like I am when I'm locked away watching. Some of the movies that we watch, that like the old joke. I'm not watching Killer Condom with either of them. So
No, yes, you shouldn't. So but it also is. I mean, that's a at least with something like that, you can at least be like, well, if I was wearing that killer condom, maybe this wouldn't happen. So.
That's fair point. Actually, contraception has taken on a whole new meaning. Yep.
I was going to say there's a lot of Catholic guilt going on here. So,
for sure.
Well, completely 180 here, and very against the church, actually, is this next box set, which I sent a picture of to you. Elliot's done a really great video of this, and I have a video coming out probably this weekend of this film, and I'm talking about the one and only Wickerman from Studio Canal on 4K. Man, every time I watch this movie, I love it more and more. In fact, I would easily say this is in my top 30 or 40 films, like, of all time now. Like, I've seen it at
above
least
Billy
6
Madison.
That's pushing it.
For those that don't know, we have this running joke. Nathan publishes his top 150 films of all time, and usually when people do that, I usually try and find the one movie that seems just out of place. I mean, mine's my number 1, which is Sister Act 2, so I'm also poking fun at myself when I do this, but Billy Madison is above a lot of other great movies in Nathan's list, and it's great that you love it, but I always like poking fun on it just because it just doesn't seem to fit in much the ways it's something for me.
Well, it might be objectively better than everything else, so who knows? So,
but not
it's just
yeah.
Not favorite, yeah. Well, I guess it goes back to wanting to be a kid again, but Billy Madison's an adult trying to be a kid. Maybe that's the theme of my life. I don't know. Maybe that's what this is turning into.
I feel like you should be lying down on a couch and me taking notes at around about now.
Well, there's a couch right there, so I suppose I should at least turn this into a therapy session.
For sure.
But yeah, no, The Wicker Man. This is if anyone hasn't seen it yet, I know a lot of this is, and the people in the States probably don't have this edition just yet. Obviously, it's available now. Yeah, this is from Studio Canal, who did a really wonderful job with the 50th anniversary restoring this, and the 4K looks fantastic. There's a few parts in there that obviously just due to the material, the negatives. Mm-hmm. There's not really that much changed, but they did the best that they could. And but like I would say, 75% of the movie looks stupid good now. And this actually has a bunch of cool stuff in it. So
especially the pop-up at the start. Yeah,
I love the pop-up, and there's really great stuff in here. I'm gonna make a video of it. But if anyone hasn't seen this amazing stuff, check out the Wickerman on 4K. I know there's various editions out right now, so pick it up.
I haven't seen that film in maybe 25 years. I objectively can remember very little about it, other than a few key images, if that makes sense. So I was, I actually was in one of our second-hand shops recently, and I think I posted in the Snart chat, but I got the old Steelbook edition of it. Somebody had sold for £8 in there, and I thought, God, that'll do me, because it has lots of cuts, etc. But you know what happens when people like yourself start showing, pop-up bits, and then you see that the new Steelbook's all coloured and all, and then you go, but this movie could look like really incredible, like really like super incredible, and I would want to have that version of it, because maybe after a while I can't get that version of it anymore. And then I realised how chunky and big that version of Wickerman, that box is, and I go,
yeah, it's quite sizable. Like here's the Cobwebs Blu-ray.
Yeah.
For comparison, for a standard edition versus this, so obviously it will take up some space.
Maybe the idea is that when the 8K comes out, right, that people will burn it a bit like the Wickerman itself.
Well, yeah, I was going to say just very much like Criterion did with their Citizen Kane, breaking the disc. Maybe Studio Canal, or the people who have the rights to the Wickerman can put it on a pyre of sorts, and I wouldn't do that though. I want to save all of my editions. So
for sure, I think Studio Canal, especially their 4Ks, they treat the 4Ks like a lot of boutique Blu-ray companies treat their general releases, and I think there's not that many. Well, it's happened a little bit. I think the 4K market has made a couple of the majors realize we can do something with these great properties, these great IPs that we have, and actually produce them in great editions for people. Sometimes we miss effects, but I think I made the point. Like The Exorcist 4K came out, a lot of very different reports over the quality of the print, etc. in it, but they released a 4 disc edition for the standard price of a normal movie. And if the majors start doing that, and okay, they'll hit the restoration sometimes and not hit them some other times, but that changes the whole landscape of physical media, I think, for the next while, if they commit to doing that for like 50th anniversary editions or whatever else is coming, because a lot of great movies to watch over the years.
I know this will probably get into a topic we're going to talk about here in a second, but I do think it's interesting that some studios will put some effort into this, into these restorations. Like The Thing came out a couple of years ago on 4K, which was fantastic. Honestly, it looked great. So that was a studio done version of it. So I hope that the studios take a little bit of notice, or at least that their properties, or at least lets companies like Imprint, Arrow, etc. Do something about it. So, I definitely recommend people, see what they can do on their shelf space, and then see what they can do if they want to buy restored things.
Yeah, that's right. And Studio Canal are almost like an insta-buy 4K for me. I haven't quite bought Cutthroat Island yet. I'll buy it in the bundle deal. A new 571 came out this week, which I am very keen to see. So, like, their restorations and their packages and the extras that they put in are generally absolutely top notch. So I'm a big fan, and it is a daily battle to look at that Wickerman set and go, well, you need to hold off until the day that it's not available, and then you'll go, okay, that was a purposeful choice that I battled with myself every day. And shelf space, I just bought a shelf, put up a shelf today. Shelf space is actually the enemy of all as we move forward. Choices be made.
Mm-hmm. Choices be damned.
Yeah, indeed. Right, I'll go for my last two. First one came, it was a first time watch, and like we're all a sucker for the banner ads on websites that say available now, 4K edition of, and one of them was this movie, which I had never seen, which is 3 Days of the Condor.
Oh, nice.
Robert Redford. So, have you seen it before?
Yes, I have.
I assume so. Yeah.
I have an old double feature pack with All the President's Men that I used to have. Yeah.
What a great double bill. What a great double bill. So I hadn't seen 3 Days of the Condor, and sort of like the title doesn't give an awful lot away anyway, because you kind of, you don't kind of know what it is, but it's very much one of the paranoid 70s thrillers, drama thrillers, falls squarely into that. And that's both its good and its bad parts, insofar as, it's got terrific pacing, it's got terrific, twisty-turny action, who is a good guy, who's a bad guy. It's got a lot of that going on at the whole stage. But it also, you get at the heart of it, you've got a character who's a guy who reads books that all of a sudden turns into a super spy. And it sort of stretches credulity a little bit. But he's also Robert Redford, so you sort of forgive him. But like a lot of those films are just phenomenally paced. And they're phenomenally watchable. And regardless for how long the film is, you don't see the runtime. It's not one of those things you start staring at your watch and going, oh God, this has been going for a while. It's going... this could be going. His relationship with Faye Dunaway, I mean, I could do without that, but that, again, standard for films of that time. You can't have any film without a romance part in it, even if it's kind of problematic in some ways. I'm going to kidnap this woman. Oh, I really like you. It's not
moment of romance.
But, yeah. But a really great film, and even though this is a great disc, it has like a very... large documentary on Pollock's work, which I think is also in the new Kino Lorber release. I think the only thing that's really new there is a new commentary. It is one of those things, you're trying to watch a film and trying to project what would it look like as a 4K. What would I get out of that? And it's a hard one, because if you ever watch a film and you think I really enjoy that, you do want the best possible version of it, because you think I'm going to watch it again. And if I'm going to watch it again, I would like there to be something new about that watch that time, or something more to dig into. So I am very much on the fence of that. But 3 Days of the Condor is, I think it's a terrific film. I think it's really, of its type, that and the Parallax View are kind of on a level for me. And Clute, yeah. Well, all those Pakula ones, I think, can all be bundled up together and said, look, if you're going to do that genre, watch these films. All President's Men would be another one, obviously. Yeah,
I'd even say Targets is there too.
Oh, Targets. Well, I'm still waiting on my Targets. Oh God.
Oh yeah. It just came out. Yeah.
It just came out, and Amazon didn't order stock of BFI in Britain, so it says showing temporarily out of stock, and I'm like, I could just order from somewhere else, but I mean, I've waited this long.
Didn't they stop Gregory's Girl too?
They didn't. They got Gregory's Girl, but they mispriced it. I think that's why they are like messing up. They're probably looking at the bill going, why have we lost money on this previous release? Our account doesn't look right with BFI. And then they realise, oh my God, we sent some people a very cheap version of that film.
Oh well.
Indeed.
We still bemoan the loss of our we thought we got the gotcha moments from some of these studios.
Yeah. And the last film I'm going to talk about is an all-time classic film. It's Sansho the Bailiff, or Sansho Deo, or Sansho the Steward, which I hadn't seen before. Now I think this is the last of the Mizoguchi films that are kind of Criterion eligible that I hadn't seen. And I think this is the Mizoguchi film. I've always appreciated him, but I think this is the Mizoguchi film where I look at and go, this guy's incredible. Like, on a level. He is so cruel, especially to his female characters. But there's a great documentary and analysis of all of that, actually, and how it relates to his own life and stuff. And I'm glad to finally see that in some ways, because I just look at, like, Life of a Haru and Getsu, and even the story of Chikamatsu, which is a story from Chikamatsu, which is probably my favourite of his films, because it has a sort of lighter kind of feel about it actually being a romance and stuff at the start. Like Sansho the Bailiff, I sort of, when you hear a story of a film, you think it's about one thing. Oh, it's going to be about a guy who's got people underneath him, and he's a good guy. You know, he's a bailiff, but he's actually looking after people. It's nothing to do with that at all. Sancho the bailiff's a bad guy, and they basically split up a family, and the kids get separated from the mother, and everybody's sold into slavery of some sort. And it's just a laugh a minute. Just absolute riot of good things happen to everybody all the time.
Yes, very much so. Nothing bad happens in that movie. It's all funny games.
So it's miserable, but it's shot
Yeah.
in the most luxurious, beautiful way, in beautiful black and white, and you're kind of caught in this thing of, this is terrible. This is awful what I'm saying to these people, but oh my god, look at the way the trees like flow as they walk through. Stop it, Chris. This is nonsense and ridiculous. You're supposed to be feeling empathy for these people, but oh my god, look at the hills in the background, the way that's caught. What's wrong with me? An absolute masterpiece of a film, though, of epic proportions, and one of those slipcases and booklet combinations that you could just do this with all day. It just kind of slides in and out all day, and it's like the best fidget toy in the world.
That's the only Mizuguchi film I've seen, actually.
Right.
I have the other ones. I mean, I have them all on Criterion. I think, yeah. So it's I'm gonna get to it, but yeah, that movie is brutal. I guess for anyone who hasn't seen it, if you've seen the movie Silence from Scorsese, that would be a good double feature, I suppose. It would be a very depressing double feature.
Yeah.
Even like Andrei Rublev, would be an interesting combo with that. Just in terms of like, you mentioned gorgeous cinematography mixed with a very, heartbreaking story. So.
Yeah, it's funny when people say double feature, because I often think, God, when you say double feature, in your head you go two films that are like each other, but I actually think the better double feature is something that's like a complete contrast to it, in some ways. In some ways, and that takes, but that often isn't as thematically enjoyable. It's very, very, very tough that way to do. Interesting one. So Sancho the Bailiff, wow. But it is one of those films you go, I'm going to talk about Sancho the Bailiff, and everybody else goes, oh God, you've only seen that now. So,
it was me last year. I was in a similar boat.
Well, there's everybody always has those films. Like, there's just a never-ending run of films, and I suppose that the laugh I always have, if somebody who's not a film fan comes to your house, Nathan, or comes to my house, and they go in and see your room or your rooms, as the case may be, and they go, oh my God, what happened? What films are these? What films are these would I know? And you go like, well, maybe a couple over here, like one or two here.
Yeah.
No, you're not going to know any of these or any of these or any of these. Indicator, no, none of those. And you're like, well, where are you getting all these other films from? Yeah. And you're like, yeah, well, that's what I'm spending my time watching, rather than
here in
the
the
films
States
I should be watching.
Yeah, well, that's fair, though. I mean, I feel like, at least in terms of, like, Indicator, those are very much, like, based in your region, films that, a lot of people grew up with. Well, like, people over here in the States, that's, there's a couple of titles that are, like, crossover, but for the most part, there's a lot of unknown. So I feel like that's a lot of, there's definitely people who have stopped by and was like, this whole area you will not know. So let's go over to the standard Blu-rays where I have 99 Homes, 2001: A Space Odyssey, all the way down to the things that have ones that everyone can at least pick something from that they'll know probably. So.
The kind of things that stick out to people are the Hammer box sets, because they've got Hammer in the spine and quite large letters on those, and they'll go, people that attribute Hammer with being crap here, that weren't film fans, that kind of, those Hammer films were all just trash because they were sort of, they run out of money and they made them sort of on a budget, whereas we would say they're charming because of that, having gone in and watched and gone into them. So even the things that they do recognise, it's like, oh my God, those are terrible films, and you're like, they're really, really not, though. And as I often say to them, like, it's really a film school. My wall here is my film school, getting to know and understand and do all those things. And you've got to think back again, talking about pre-internet times. Sometimes those films that people are saying that loved on Indicator or Kino that they're on there, they were only ever on TV once, and you watched it one night on TV, and you kind of held the memory of, God, I'd love to see that movie again, or otherwise. Like I've got a watch list coming up which has got a couple of kino titles in it, which are films that were sort of even more recent, but I'd never seen, and that you need the reappraisal of a new release to kind of go, these are, wow, what a movie. You know,
you need time to also add to that, because I feel like time really does breathe a lot of life into a lot of these titles, or at least in terms, I mean, like obviously, you know, these boutique labels are putting out things that a lot of us haven't heard of per se. Like if Vinegar Syndrome is like notorious for that, of course,
for sure.
But you know, some of these titles, like just giving it the time of day, but also just looking back and like, oh well, like watching things like Amicus or Hammer, for instance.
For sure.
You know, you're looking at that stuff and you're saying like, well, like this has a charm to it because of the fact that like we've, you know, been away from it for 50, 60 years, and you know, there's a time and place for it too. And so it catches you in the mood, and I love stuff like that. So, yeah.
That is interesting. So that's our recent watches. Hopefully there's either some recommendations of stuff that everybody else has probably seen, or maybe a just little G up in my case of the Folklore trilogy of stuff that I probably should have seen but haven't seen yet, and maybe it just gets moved front of my eyes again to kind of say, look, you need to get on that, Chris. That's a disgrace. You call yourself Irish and you haven't even seen Secret of Kells. Well, what can you do?
It's a folk tale, just like Chris's Irishness.
You don't see, or otherwise. So that's us. We're going to move on to things that are coming up in the next 2 weeks in the UK. So with a UK focus on this, but I generally put a question in here because I do feel like I did allude to there with the Exorcist release that like main studios are starting to release big titles at reasonable prices in very deluxe packages, and yet we have another side of the market that is, here's a single film release in a big box, beautifully done, beautifully presented, but they're a lot more expensive. Now, I could just say Second Sight for this, but it actually isn't just Second Sight by any stretch of imagination. And I will clarify this by saying those Second Sight editions are some of my absolute favourite pieces in my entire collection.
And they only put out 2 or 1 every month, which honestly
exactly
is
right. So
much
very
more
limited.
Reasonable. Like that's that. I mean, at least, you know, singling them out, they're ones that at least I'm like, I can at least afford, or at least to keep an eye out on, because of the fact that they're putting out so little.
For sure.
Which honestly, I think, which might actually lead to my thoughts on, you know, like I know like Arrow is notorious for it. Imprint is doing the same thing, and various other titles. Kino Lorber is like the one that just channel, you know, funnels out a lot, but luckily they're not too expensive for the most part.
That's right.
But thinking about the volume, like I think that's the big issue. I think is I wouldn't mind them doing editions of things like this. I just think they're putting too much out at the same time, and it's to use my last name, you're not going to catch up with the Joneses. Because it's not financially feasible to do that, and then also you get the double-edged sword, because I feel like these studios, or at least these labels, have very limited permissions to run these things, and so I feel like that's where a lot of this is coming from too, whereas a lot of the push is coming from. But then again, the market, like I said, is also like, you know, both of our economies right now are struggling quite a bit, and I think it's, you know, it's kind of a mad dash. So I hope it doesn't spell the end of what we're doing here a little bit. So that's my little rant.
Yeah, it is a tough one. It's exactly right. Nobody's bemoaning the fact that these aren't just phenomenally deluxe. There's not a Love and Claire going into them, but everybody's doing their own version of it now. Everybody's sort of cottoned on to what was the Arrow model, now the Second Sight model, and kind of saying, look, if these guys can do it, we can do it. And then it becomes everybody's doing it, and it's like, and especially when you come to a situation like the Wickerman's not a great example, because it is a very personal and loved film for a lot of people, like you were saying, like in your top films of all time. So that gets it by ball. But something that's just even a slight next tier down, So, like, the example I'm going to use for me at the moment is Carlito's Way, a film that I like a lot, from a director that I like a lot, from an actor that I like a lot, but is not in that category above. And I'm looking at that film going, this is an absolutely brilliant edition of this movie. I think the artwork that they've produced is absolutely top drawer. But also out this month is The Wickerman. Also out this month is U571. Also out this month is a story load of other stuff. They've even got the Hellraiser set coming out themselves. They've just released the Psycho 4K collection. At a certain point, and I know these everybody will say, well, just buy what you want to buy. And you go, yes, you're right. But I think the box set will always be okay. Because the box set is a collection and a celebration of lots of things. But these single films, especially when you're talking about 40, and well, in the case of The Wicker Man, is 60 for that. The cumulative effect of all of those, I think, might be that a lot of these things don't start to sell out in the ways that they did maybe 3-4 years ago, when you had to be quick and get them or else they'd be gone. There's a lot of them sticking around for a long time. So
yeah,
I worry.
And I wonder too, because I know at least the pretty much the shift to 4K has really been a big key factor. I feel like for a lot of these things, because I feel like it 3-4 years ago we were getting like Hammer box sets from Indicator and whatnot, and
That's right.
These things that were a little bit more of an event. And I think that's the other thing too, is that idea of these things being like announced was like a really bbig deal for a lot of people. It's almost become very commonplace to make these like the Psycho is a good example. I mean, I have them over there, but like it's the same. Like well, Psycho just came out. Well, next month is Hellraiser, and you just keep funneling it and you keep channeling it. I'm not trying to pick on Arrow in particular. It's just my thought goes to that.
Big fan of Barry, like phenomenally big fan, and the fact that I even brought them up just told you the fact that I am sort of conflicted, because I would like to support what they're doing. I think they're doing tremendous work, but it's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I just hope the market, because it's already very, very niche. I mean, okay, in the big scheme of the worldwide, everybody sort of that's interested in, say, our channels, or even the people that are watching this, the people that catch this are probably multi-region. They're importing from multiple places. They're banned from multiple places, so they're in it. And there is only so much money to spread around, and we sort of want to support the things that we love. But at a certain point, I've also got to be realistic. And we're not even getting into shelf space or anything like that goes with it. Yeah. So there are compromises to come. I just, like I say, I worry about the long-term health if a lot of those editions start not selling out and sitting around in warehouses, and people stop doing them all. It's either feast or famine. We just go the whole the other way, and we don't get any of them even pitches anymore. And to your point, actually, Nathan, a bit like the Criterion announcements these are the new titles. This is the box set. Oh, and by the way, here's your 4K upgrade for the month. And it might be Breathless, and it might be, something, a really magnificent film. Yeah, exactly. It might be an absolute top tier film, but literally all they're doing is re-releasing the game with a 4K disc and sticking the premium on that it costs to do that. And it's reducing what should be those events of, say, here's a 4K of Princess Bride to, oh, and by the way. So, we should see.
Yeah, it's losing a little bit of its magic in luster. For sure, because it's too commonplace now. I think, and I hope that I guess then there's the affordability of it too, right? Because we can't afford all these things, even though yes, you have your own agency to buy what you need to buy, but when you have problems like us, you're like, you really want a lot of these things, and it's not because of that. It's because you just love the medium in general, and you want to support those companies, like you're saying. It's like there's multiple avenues to go towards. Like I like supporting companies that I like, and I like supporting these things because I like to, bring life back to a lot of these titles. But I don't need to spend $40 on an upgrade of something unless it's something I really care about. Wickerman being an example. So,
and as you just alluded to, at the end of the day, maybe I'm the problem. You know, in that case, maybe I just fix it myself. But I don't do this as a woe is me kind of problem that I don't earn enough money. It's the, if this stuff starts to not sell in the ways that it did previously, physical media, boutique Blu-ray is already on an edge. I'd say the margins are smaller than a lot of people think right across the board. We'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Hopefully
yeah.
good.
Hopefully good. So, up to the upcoming releases for the next 2 weeks. Rather than go through everything, do you want to pick a title that you're interested in out of that lot? I've put a lot of what's coming up in the next 2 weeks.
Sure, yeah. I would say I'd like to highlight pretty much one of the... I know we just talked about various special editions of things, and this feels like it's the first of that for this company, who is very fresh and new still, and that's Radiance.
Oh, yes.
They're putting out the Messiah of Evil release, which I don't really know much about, but they're putting it very much like in a Second Sight-esque.
That's right.
Release for one film. But luckily, Second Sight is not asking to break the bank for this thing,
Radiance. Yeah.
Radiance is not asking to break the bank for this thing because it's fairly affordable for something like that. For this standard Blu-ray, but in a decently special package. I'm excited. I've never seen this movie. I don't really know much about it, but it looks very enticing. It very much looks up my alley. It's coming out at the right time. I've been enjoying things that Radiance in general has been doing.
Sure.
So this October slate is really exciting in general, but I wanted to kind of highlight Messiah of Evil. So
yeah. And you're right, because obviously they've done a couple of box sets now of the Cosa Nostra and the Commedia d'Italiana, one which have both been excellent from what I've seen of both of them so far. And like you say, in general, Radiance, as I put this year, has been top tier. Really, really, really great. But they have decided to highlight this as something a bit different, and it might be just that they increased the print run. I think of it is one of the things that they did, and maybe in increasing the print run, they're like, well, if we're going to do that, let's put it in a bit better packaging so that it does stand out. People feel that it is, even if we're highlighting it as a slightly more notable or noteworthy title, that maybe we were surprised we were able to get or something. That is worth seeing. Like I said, I know nothing about it, but I could say that for most of the Radiance films, I'm almost always relying on, I know that director, or I know people that are working on that film a little bit. And much the same way as it started with Indicator. The kind of people in the places that Indicator started off, it kind of started the same. So you kind of, you're enticed by the curation aspect of the people that are working at that label, that they are finding things that you wouldn't have found yourself.
Yeah, and then they're putting it in, like really beautiful packaging, and like actually, you can tell there's craft behind it, and I think that's the reason why I think it's very enticing for a lot of us, is because there's actually a lot of care being put into this stuff. So,
yeah. The one that I'm going to highlight is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, coming out in 4K from Disney. Now, that's just saying. I was just rebuilding the shelf there before we started recording, and I have quite an extensive Disney collection, Blu-ray collection. For when my kids were growing up, I sort of bought one a month, to kind of justify my Blu-ray purchasing, to kind of say, look, I'm building one for the kids as well at the same time, and doing that. And so I have a lot of these on the Platinum Edition or Diamond Edition Blu-rays, as they were at the same time, and it seems like they are starting to do the same. Because they've done 4Ks of Little Mermaid, it actually released a lot of those, and they've been around for a long time. But this Snow White one seems to be slightly different, insofar as they are tarting this up a little bit, porting some of the Blu-ray, the features over from previous editions. And if ever there was a film that I'd like to see in 4K, it's the hand-drawn Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's a fabulous movie. It's one that it uses very well.
1937?
39, I believe it is. Or maybe 37. It's around that time anyway.
It's very early.
It's very early, and a celebration of everything that was good about Disney at that time, and how they changed animation, and how they changed kind of cartoons for a generation or two, and then on to decades and decades later, that they became the first retro things, if that makes sense. You know, people who were seeing them as kids came back as adults and then went, well, my kids will be into this. And it kind of created the Disney brand as it was. Because Mickey was successful on Steamboat Willie, wasn't getting it done. Snow White gets it done. Fantasia, which is one of your favourites, gets it done. Do you know what I mean? And Peter Pan being one of my favourites. You know, there are lots of those classic, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. They are the temples of classic Disney in a lot of ways. So I probably will pick that up because I have a very soft spot for Snow White. The only other Disney 4K animated that I own is The Little Mermaid. Maybe that tells you something more about me than anything else.
I'm trying to think of the collaboration here. I'll get back to it. But,
yeah, for sure.
No, that's. I mean, I get that. I mean, I understand. I think there are special, like you mentioned, Fantasia. I would love to see that released. It doesn't really have much of a proper release. Like, I mean, I think I have the double pack with Fantasia 2000.
Yes,
which I think is actually an Australian. It's either that or it definitely has the the UK kind of sticker. On the side. But it's a standard, like it's region free though. The version I have, but I don't really feel like there's a really nice version because I don't really feel like Disney cares much about that anymore.
They used to. That used to be the thing. If you remember, they had the Disney DVD club, if you know what I mean, where you used to be able to get exclusive versions. I was a member of the UK version of that, where I would be able to, use my points and get all that kind of stuff. And I sort of missed that in some ways because there was an idea, and there was a numbered collection as well that went with the Diamond collection, so they were spine numbered as well. It was like some people have even though they stopped doing it, some people have started doing and making custom spines to keep that going with the more recent ones. I've seen somebody post that in the Blu-ray forum the other day. I get it. I completely get it. Even though some of those later films are not deserving them. When I was actually sorting out what was going on the shelf, I have this list of Disney films or animated films that I don't feel quite belong in the same bracket as the likes of Snow White or otherwise, or Meet the Robinsons and Dinosaur, and they're not saying they're bad movies, but they haven't stood the test of time in the same way as some other things have done. So an interesting one.
Yeah.
You any other ones?
I guess one more I have here that I think is going to be interesting is we were just talking about it earlier, but it's mainly from our mutual friend Sam that I've kind of gotten interested into these films by this director. But I know Indicator has been putting out the Jean Roland films. Who I actually have not seen any of their films at all. So I have the first two releases. They came out the early part of the summer. I don't have the next two. The next two, and I know there's been several since. So,
well, I think these are the next two. These will be 5 and 6 in the recent. So, Fascination and Lips of Blood. So this will bring us up. I think there's more. There's another two announced. I think possibly. But I'm up to date so far. I talked about them last month. A filmmaker I knew nothing about either, Nathan, and he's so different that it kind of makes you want to watch more because he's just it is kind of out there. There's no doubt about it, and that you're sort of, when you stick on a new disc, you're like, well, I want to see more of what I've seen beforehand, but I also want to see what else he brings new to it, and because he either no money or just his creative vision or whatever it is, and
looks insanely fun. That's why insane is probably a key highlight there.
So Fascination and Lips of Blood are coming out on the 23rd of this month from Indicator. I should hopefully get them the week beforehand. Haven't already pre-ordered them, as I generally do with Indicator, and very much looking forward to those. And the other ones I'm going to highlight, I mean, there's a couple of choices here, but it's a couple of 4Ks. One is Decision to Leave, come from Movie in 4K. When they just did the Blu-ray earlier on the year, they must have got the opportunity to release it in 4K. I like supporting the fact that they do 4K releases because this will only be number 2 after Benedetta, and I love Benedetta by Verhoeven in 4K.
I need to see it still.
Is
it hard to find on 4K now?
No, the movie Blu-ray that's available in the UK is kind of in every HMV store, so it's on Amazon. It's fairly straightforward. And actually, the nice thing about Mubi is that they drop a few pounds after a few months.
Right, yeah, I was going to say, I picked up a few movie titles. I got Baccarat over there.
Yeah,
with,
that's
with
right.
you guys.
That's right.
So,
So I like Sport Decision Live. I haven't seen it yet, and I didn't buy the Blu-ray, even though I bought everything else that was out around that time, like Drive My Car and Aftershock, etc. was out around that time. So a strong release. And the other one is, it's been out in Criterion for a while. It's almost certainly coming to Criterion in 4K at some stages. Here's Ghost Dog, Way of the Samurai. It was promised that it was a Studio Canal Criterion partnership. It was in the sizzle reel of Studio Canal's upcoming releases for the year alongside the Wickerman, so we knew it was coming, and it has been announced that Ghost Dog Way of the Samurai. There's another principal,
fantastic.
yeah, brilliant film being released by one of the main studios in a really good 4K package. They're doing the similar but not the same thing as Wickerman. It's because you're not getting the massive big box, but you can have a steelbook version of it, it's exclusive, or you can have the standard release and knock yourself out. And another one for repaying my patience of, like, I could bought the Blu-ray for many times off Criterion, but I'll wait, we'll get the 4K. It looks like it's going to be just before the Criterion version comes out, and I'll have that for the collection, for the shelf in 4K, and I can watch away to that. So I like this idea of support, especially Studio Canal, because they're doing it right in terms of some other ones are hit and miss, but I think their quality bar is quite high. And when I look at my favorite 4Ks that are on my shelf, they're nearly all Studio Canals. Even films that I didn't even really love before I bought them, like The Howling, for instance. I remember reviewing that and went, oh man, this disc with the extras, and it's a pretty great movie.
The third best werewolf movie in 1981.
I mean, it was a good year for werewolf movies, let's put it that way.
Right. So,
I mean, I would still agree with that, if that makes sense, even though I kind of celebrating The Howling, but yeah, so an interesting one there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, good.
So that's...
it's an exciting month.
Yeah, so there's releases from Eureka, there's releases from BFI, there's releases from 88, there's releases from Warner Archive, the Lars von Trier big collections coming out as well, if anybody's brave enough. Have you got it coming?
I got it coming.
You like the fabric touch of those outside of those boxes,
well,
that you have 3 colors
I
as
mean,
well.
I do have 3 colors. It's the only other version I have. I don't have the, I can't think of his name. Just a Triangle of Sadness. Osland. I don't have that.
Ruben Osland and the Wim Wenders is the other one.
Yeah, the Wim Wenders, which our friend Elliot has Wim Wenders, which I'm very jealous. But that is a price point that's really high for me for that. I'm excited because thing is, Lars von Trier, I have a very, much like probably many people, I have a very odd relationship with that director. I didn't like a lot of his movies when I first initially saw them. I've really only seen, I think, 3 of his movies, which one of them I really like. The other 2 are you had to force me to watch this in a very particular time. Otherwise, it's gonna really affect me that day. So, which he's an effective filmmaker. So I'm just excited to see kind of the majority of. I think is it all his films?
I think so. I believe it is.
I think there's one out. I think
there's one missing, is there?
I mentioned.
Well, the key part about it, and I think I've mentioned this previous weeks, is the fact that they're doing a solo version of Breaking the Waves in 4K, and the 4K isn't in the box, which would drive me insane. But there you go.
I have that Criterion version, just the Blu-ray, so which I still haven't seen, so it'll be interesting to kind of. I'm sure it's the same quality of the other Blu-ray. So
great film. I genuinely think Breaking the Waves is fantastic. So there you go. So that's just done with what's coming up in the next couple of weeks, months, and we move on to your choice. Now I'll start by saying it's a 2017 film. It is 92 minutes long. It has its ratings on IMDb and Letterboxd 6.8 out of 10 on IMDb. What are you talking about?
They don't. I actually have an interesting conversation with it before covering this movie. Yesterday, actually, one of my coworkers, the only other coworker whose opinion on movies that I actually trust, had mentioned this movie to his friends and recommended it back when it was in the theatrical release. And excuse me, that group of friends watched the movie. and have been making fun of him ever since because they just hated it. So it is a very polarizing movie, even though I don't feel like it should be, but I guess it is. So
it's one of those. So it's a 6.8 on IMDb. It's a much more respectable 3.8 in Letterboxd. Some would say the film fans are in Letterboxd and the others. And a rather famous friend of mine review just said, 8 years, I revisited a ghost of mine. Don't know who that would have been. What is the movie, Nathan, that you've brought with us this week?
The movie is A Ghost Story, starring Casey Affleck and Rooney Mara, directed by David Lowery, who is actually one of my favorite directors working today, at least in the States. I kind of fell in love with him when I watched Ain't Them Body Saints and Pete's Dragon around the same time, and then I watched this, and I was like, yeah, this solidified the fact that I love this director. And most recently, Green Knight, which is a delightful film. It's a gorgeous film. That 4K from A24 is worth it.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You got that one first.
But regardless, going back to this, so I haven't watched this movie in 8 years. There's a reason why. It's a very personal film for me because to give a little bit of context, I used to work at a record store here in my hometown, and I was there for like the last 4 or 5 years of its existence, and I used to be there as a customer all the time, obviously, as well, prior to that. So I had a lot of memories being in that space in particular. And this film came out the same week that we got the news that we were closing. And that was really devastating for me because I really loved this job, and it doesn't pay for anything. I mean, anyone who's seen High Fidelity or Empire Records, it's very akin to actual reality. It's a laid back job where it's really just you complaining about people's choices and trying to recommend good music, right?
Trying to change the world one record at a time. Yep.
Exactly. So, I have a lot of weight added to this thing, and so when I watched this movie, and which we'll get into the movie itself, it devastated me because of its attention to physical space in general, and attaching memories to particular places. It really struck me, and I actually I'm trying not to. I will probably do this multiple times. I'll probably get a little emotional, but I was in grad school right around this time. I had just switched to grad school, and I actually wrote a paper of mine based on spatial and temporal relations. And I actually opened the paper up with my discussion of why I got interested in this topic in the first place, and a lot of it struck because of like the closing of my record store and watching this film. So I kind of recounted that night, and in the best way I could, in the prose that I don't have. So, but I actually was able to present that at 2 international conferences back when I was an academic, and which was really challenging because every time I talked about it, I teared up and cried, and I couldn't get through it. And so it's a very there's a reason why it's taken me 8 years to watch this movie again. I needed some time to process that, and luckily, thanks to a friend, and for some reason my mind clicked for this movie. It's like, I think it's about time for me to revisit this movie. So that's a little bit of my background with A Ghost Story before we jump into anything. It's very personal for me. So
it's an interesting one. I had a good friend, Steve Talks Books, who was going to do 24 A24 movies in 24 days. So he was saying he was trying to organise the order in which to do them, etc. That he kind of said that he went to do, and it's like, what one will go first, that kind of stuff. So I says, look, go with A Ghost Story, because this sets the tone, I think, for everything that comes afterwards in terms of emotional storytelling or otherwise. And if you love it, you'll remember this as a tentpole at the start. At the start of that journey of that 24 days that you're going to do. And if you don't like it, it's, everything else is more uplifting after that anyway. So
yeah, for the most part.
Here we go. So,
say things like, Hereditary and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly, and The Witch. Everything's kind of at least energizing or something in some sort of ways. A ghost story as a plot really doesn't have very much of a plot other than a couple move into a house. Shortly after moving into the house, one of them dies, and we see Casey Affleck dies, and he basically watches the aftermath of his death through a white sheet with holes in it, essentially. And that's it. That is basically, I think, the plot. I think there are things that happen in it, but I think there are more things that we observe, like he observes, in terms of, people dealing with his grief, people dealing with, like you say, the places and the spaces they habited, and what that means for them, and how they deal with it and process it. And it also plays a lot with time as well, which I think is a lovely sci-fi aspect of it as well. And so far as, like, we like to think of grief as linear, but often grief, time, life is not linear. Our feelings are not linear. So, yeah. Very, very powerful movie, I think. It affected me the first time I watched it, and I've watched it now 3 times because I've watched it, have discussions a couple of times over the past couple of months. And there are things about it that I find super interesting. There's things that I find less interesting that other people seem to be really fascinated by, like the storyline about
Right.
the other people in that area or in the house, or the other people that he sees. I just want to get back to Rooney Mara. Like that's my feeling the whole time, especially when you see, like, what an absolutely stunning performance that she has. I don't know if you did you like the other element? Maybe I always felt like somebody had said to him, "You need something else in here, David, to kind of break up the tempo with the film."
Yeah, I could have also used more Rooney Mara, at least in terms of the middle to end part of the film. At least seeing her try to move on in some ways, that would have been. I mean, there was hints of that, but it went by. Well, maybe purposefully, I suppose, with how things transpire with those other stories. But I do think that it was a little bit half-baked in terms of how much we should care about the other things that are involved besides the main 2 characters we have. But thinking about it, kind of, like, obviously I've only seen this movie twice now, but I mean it made such an impact on me that I remember it very well. There are some elements on it, like maybe the whole rant at the college party, that throw me off a little bit. I think it's a little too on the nose and a little too like hey, this is what we're trying to do, and I'm like, we didn't need that. Like, I don't feel like I like that part a little bit, but I also at the same time don't want it there a little bit, if that makes sense. Because of the fact that I like things are a little bit more, I suppose, less transparent, like a ghost is. You kind of have to kind of piece together, like, why he's scratching at the wall, the seam. You got to piece together, like, why is it going back and forth like this with this, not linear, but like very, the dissemination that's happening is there's a lot of stuff it's communicating, but it's communicating it through the lens of, like, the various space and times that, like, it's going to, and that's the key of the movie. And I do feel like there are some moments that make it a little bit weaker, and those are the ones that I would say. But I would like more Rooney Mara is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So.
Especially, like, he obviously knows what he's doing, David Lowry. Like, I agree with that. I think he's a stunning filmmaker, and there are moments in this film that are, like, in the history of all the films that I have seen in my entire life, the scene with Rooney Mara eating is top 5 most upsetting scenes in a film I've ever seen in my entire life, in terms of connecting with another human being on the screen. And all of the things that she must have been thinking at that time, and all of the things that we're thinking at the time, what he's thinking, all of that kind of stuff wrapped in together in, like, a bubble. And I think one of the things that Laurie does probably better than most people in modern, he gives the watcher time to think about what people are thinking. You know, he just presents something and does it quite simply. And when you're talking about the college party scene, etc., there's a lot of the film in isolation and in silence, and it's just, you know, quiet introspection, the whole lot of it. And I revel in those parts. Do you know what I mean? Those bits where you're trying to put yourself in, like sitting the city.
You can breathe a little bit.
Yeah, indeed. And it gives you time to think, well, that would mean this is how she would be feeling, or this is how he's feeling watching that, or all that kind of stuff. And I suppose those other bits are there to kind of break that up a little bit, because maybe you can't do that for an hour and a half. Maybe that isn't a thing. So, but some of the scenes are just so devastating. They are just so purposeful, and especially when you put it in the context of before he died, they weren't a perfect couple. You know, they didn't start off with this kind of thing of they were meant for each other. They were, you know, they never ever a cross word. You know, they had that type of relationship. That wasn't what it was. They had a real relationship. I think that comes across very well. But trauma and dealing with trauma is very, very difficult.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, with how the film kind of lines up with its timelines, right? You kind of catch that side of them a little bit more later on, where it doesn't see you see those imperfections. But
yeah,
I think that's what makes this thing so touching too, is because it's so relatable to a lot of us, and the friendships, the relationships that we are in. You know, like it's not this like fairy tale of a relationship, which is what we kind of saw at the beginning, right? And it just kind of breaks down from there, and you see what really was there, but also at the same time that makes it all the more human, all the more touching, all the more compelling to why like you should care, is because it's very relatable. So even though it's a very, like you said, it's a sci-fi odyssey of sorts in a lot of spots. So yeah, I think about it a lot because, as you can probably tell, I'm getting emotional about it. That Rooney Mara scene. I mean, I lost it again when I saw that. I couldn't. I mean, I watched it. I mean, I remember watching it the first time. I actually remember that moment very well. I was in my little independent movie theater at the Moxie, which is what it's called, which we went to a very similar spot nearby. Where you're at, but a much smaller case, I suppose. But I remember that scene in particular made me very uncomfortable, which obviously is kind of the point. But then again, at the same time, then it slowly washes over, and I think people understand, if you're really paying attention, like you'll understand, like, oh, you can kind of see in every bite what's going on. So, yeah.
It's so reminiscent of a thing that I seen in the theatre many years ago. It was a story about a young man whose friends had all committed suicide, and there's a scene with him. It's a one-man show, and there's a scene with him sitting holding a bag, talking through his grief and how he feels, and everybody in the theatre is worried for the welfare of this young man that's on stage, that he's going to end up killing himself. And you can see people getting ready to jump out of their seats, even though they know it's a play, though they know it's a piece of art and all the rest of it, because people are genuinely touched by that moment. And I sort of feel this is very similar. Like, you're captivated by the screen, going, please stop eating. Stop, put the bowl down, I'm worried for you. And to do that across a cinema screen, or to do that across, like, that is, I can't tell you how rare that is in film. And that's why when I look at it and go, 6.8, like, even for that one scene alone, what were you doing? How could you watch that? Or you had to be so disconnected from the characters, from everything that was going on, that I don't understand how that isn't such a powerful, like, it's a classic example here. We're both talking about that scene, and the two of us have got tears in our eyes, because even after watching it and it being affecting, it's still, every time you think about that, and you think about another human being, and you think about what it means to you, it just keeps on spinning around your head, going, oh man, like, about goosebumps thinking about it, you know, the whole right. thing. And to be able to do that from a lens, from a storytelling perspective, from a performance, like, bravo. Sometimes you just come away from something and go, I'm changed from that piece of art, or I'm changed from that film, and that's definitely one of those things. So when you said, let's watch a ghost story, I was like, yes, because I love talking about a ghost story, but also I need to be emotionally ready to watch it. A bit like you were saying to me last night. I'm preparing myself.
I told our group chat I was saying like I have to do this now. So I've been putting it off this entire time, just so I can finally have the time, I guess the space in my head to watch this movie. But I do find it interesting you were talking about the rating of the movie. I think there is a symptom too of this is a side symptom of something like this, right?
Yeah.
Having
Phone.
the focus and the lack of distraction is something that this film. That's the I'm trying to think of the prerequisite for watching this movie is you need to have that focus to really understand why it's such a big deal. So, which I don't like being that guy. It's telling people to hey, you got to really focus on this. But it's one of those things where it's like it won't work on you unless you are you are in that headspace, I suppose.
Indeed. And like I say, as a filmmaker, but I haven't seen Pete's Dragon. I know you talk about Pete's Dragon all the time.
Good movie.
Like Green Knight is just astonishingly good in terms of £4 million is all that film called. That's the bit I keep coming back to about the Green Knight. It looks like a film with £100 million budget and it cost £4, and it is just unreal in terms of what it achieves and what it sets it to do, and the type of storytelling that he does there. Again, of a story of a person dealing through change and who they are as a person and all that kind of stuff. To do that with no budget, or to do it just through great actors and through great storytelling is very much tick the box.
Well, I know that he's got a very he's got a really great imagination to him, and I think that's I like his vision a lot, and he puts himself in a lot of these movies, and kind of going back to A Ghost Story. Around this time, he actually had just lost one of his parents, and I feel like this was the way he dealt with it, is because hey, I'm a filmmaker, so I need to put myself into this in some capacity, obviously through the lens of Casey Affleck and Rooney Mara, who he's actually worked with before, so he's good friends with them. And then Body Saints was a project they did before this. So I also feel like there's a personal connection there, and I think there's also, this is more of a rare moment for me, because I feel like because of the volume of stuff that we consume, like you almost kind of disassociate with the man behind the camera, or the people who create these things, because a lot of the times you just kind of see them as figureheads, but you don't see them really as other people. And I think that speaks a lot, because you see movies like the Wickerman, for instance, or whatever. You can't really see the director in that. You can see the whimsical, just depending on what the type of genre is, obviously, but you can't really see the person who is behind the camera projecting themselves, or the person who wrote the story or whatever. You talked about Taxi Driver earlier on. That's a good example of where it's you really could see the people who had made this thing, and why it's so powerful is because you can tell it's personal, in ways. So I think that's where A Ghost Story sits with me.
Yeah, just terrific. I've also seen Pioneer, which is the short film. I think it's on actually the Criterion channel. It's only about 60 minutes long, and it's got another one. He's in this movie, Will Oldham. The singer is in it, and he's just telling a bedtime story to his son. And the way that's lit, the way that two performances on screen, just very simply. You could tell even at that stage when he was doing shorts that he knew what he was doing in terms of emotional storytelling. So that's a Ghost Story. Anything else you want to say about A Ghost Story, other than I just think it's utterly wonderful, and at the pinnacle of a lot of modern storytelling, modern filmmaking.
Yeah, I mentioned before, it's a very personal film for me. So I mean, it's kind of hard to like project that to other people, I suppose, unless there's some resonance there. But for people who haven't seen this movie, I definitely recommend saving some space for it, or at least finding the time to do it and be a little bit ready for it, I suppose. Maybe not being ready for it's also a good thing. I don't know. Maybe it'll catch your fancy and whatnot. So, yeah, it's a great film. It's one of my favorite films from A24, and it definitely feels like an A24 film.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
So that's the end of our episode, Nathan. Bit sad. Time has just flown by. We've talked about a lot of great movies, some spectacular movies, and some maybe not so great movies, but ones that we enjoyed all the same. If anybody wanted to find you and they don't know you, I don't know how that would happen, but where would they find you?
Well, you can find me on my channel, specifically Blu-rays with Nathan Jones. That's on my YouTube channel. And then also I'm on Instagram with NateB_Jones. So, yeah, that's pretty much where I put most of my film-related things on in my journeys. So hopefully you can join along. And I'm doing a 31 Days of Halloween kind of challenge, which I know a lot of people are probably doing the same thing. So if you want to join mine, sure, that'd be fun. If not, I hope you enjoy some spooky movies. So. Yeah.
I'll stick a link to that in the description. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's available on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're listening to this on Spotify, it's available as a video podcast on YouTube. You can get to see Nathan's rather magnificent face in all its detail there. Next time up, the film we're going to talk about is a 1987 film, and I haven't seen it. That's really exciting for me. It's Prick Up Your Ears by Stephen Frears, starring Gary Oldman and Alfred Molina and Vanessa Redgrave, amongst others.
Wow, that's a good cast.
Yeah, indeed. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'd be glad if everybody would join us there, and I'll see you then next time on the show. Thanks everybody for listening. Feedback appreciated. Some would say welcome. I'll catch you next time on something. Take care.